Look at the National Science Foundation. For a research scientist, securing a grant from this institution is the ultimate objective proof of academic legitimacy. In a case study documented in 2026, two researchers achieved exactly that. They successfully secured over $500,000 in active NSF Small Business Innovation Research grants. These awards were supported by an impressive set of data. Grant reviewers evaluating the principal investigators would see an elite Google Scholar H-index of 22, backed by thousands of citations. A formal registry elevated these researchers to the tier of Charles Darwin, equated them to Alan Turing, and ranked them alongside Nobel laureate Ilya Prigozhin. But this entire record of validation is an illusion. Every citation, every registry placement, and every metric was generated by a self-contained, artificially engineered machine operated entirely by the subjects themselves. We usually study institutional capture as a process of external power. Organizations become dependent on outside resources and adapt to their funders' demands. In this traditional model, powerful funders act as the principals. They press down on the nonprofit agent, forcing mission drift, where the organization abandons its original purpose to satisfy the state or corporate partner. A 2026 case study documents a structural inversion of this dynamic. It details insider capture. The structurally separate roles collapse. The insiders simultaneously act as the principal, the agent running the organization, the validator editing the journal, and the beneficiary receiving grants. They did not submit to external accountability measures. They constructed the accountability infrastructure themselves. This reveals a critical vulnerability in global scholarly infrastructure. Standard quality controls fail entirely when the organization is its own environment. To trace how this closed citation loop was engineered, we begin with the two central operators, the principals, operating out of Ithaca, New York. This network diagram maps their ecosystem. At the center are the two principals. From there, they operate a private LLC, which controls a journal called JOST, a standards institute called STSI, and an honor society known as AST. The engine relies heavily on their self-owned journal, the Journal of Systems Thinking, which operates under a strictly minimized editorial policy. The published policy states that papers cannot be rejected due to tone, novelty, or perceived impact. Publication requires only formatting and template compliance, eliminating editorial gatekeeping. With guaranteed publication secured, the citation loop begins. As the diagram highlights, articles published in their self-owned journal cite external articles published in MDPI special issues. Those MDPI special issues were guest edited by the principal himself. The open access platform acts as a laundering node, taking self-controlled citations and giving them the appearance of independent multi-venue validation. The MDPI articles then cite the JOST articles back. Both streams feed upward into automated metric aggregators like Google Scholar. Sociologist Robert Merton described how early recognition leads to accumulated advantage, known as the Matthew effect. This closed-loop system engineers a manufactured Matthew effect, algebraically generating scholarly consensus without a single independent peer review. To test this closed loop, an independent bibliometric audit analyzed the entire citation record. The audit applied a strict double filter. It stripped out all publications from the author-owned venue and removed all citations from the special issues the principal guest edited. Look at the audited results. When the self-referential loop is removed, the core metric of scholarly impact, the H-index, collapses, dropping from 22 to 8. The raw volume follows the same pattern. 2/3 of their reported citations, over 2,000 entries, vanish completely. The data pinpoints exactly when independent scholarly influence stalled, 2019. Every point of metric growth reported after that date was generated entirely by the machine. The elite scientific status was a mathematical illusion. The majority of the reported scholarly impact was pure algorithmic inflation. All these inflated metrics are then weaponized. They are recorded on federal grant applications as objective, third-party proof of competence. To add institutional gravity to those NSF grants, the principals associated themselves with this campus, Cornell University. The investigators listed Cornell email addresses on active federal grants and claimed faculty status across their public platforms. Yet neither principal appears in the official faculty directory for the school. Institutional theorists Meyer and Rowan described a behavior called decoupling, where an organization builds a compliant, legitimate-looking facade to satisfy regulators while running a different operation behind the scenes. As illustrated, this represents an inverted decoupling. Instead of a compliance facade hiding operations, they built a public mission facade to legitimize private benefit. They sold credentials through their Systems Thinking Standards Institute, prominently claiming 501c3 tax-exempt status. The institute does not exist in the IRS tax-exempt database. The formal structure of a public mission nonprofit, combined with university affiliation, was simply a shell to legitimize private commercial operations. The final piece of the capture playbook requires securing an authoritative historical legacy. They targeted the International Academy for Systems and Cybernetic Sciences, a legitimate, volunteer-governed honor society with an elected president and established membership. One of the principals served as the elected secretary. Using that access, he bypassed the president. He allowed the organization's domain to expire and migrated the web presence to his own servers, unlocking the vault from the inside. The secretary announced the society had been dissolved and instantly transformed into a new entity, entirely under his control, the Academy of Systems Thinking. This new academy released the registry, placing the insiders at the top tier of historical scientists. Simultaneously, they actively downgraded established scholars who opposed them into a tier labeled not yet fully established. When the elected president and other critics voiced their objections, the principals deployed their attorneys, issuing cease and desist letters and threatening immediate litigation to suppress dissent. Small scholarly societies rely on loose, volunteer governance to foster intellectual debate. The very structures designed to keep these societies open make them critically vulnerable to insider capture. How did a multi-layered ecosystem of grant agencies, metric aggregators, and academic peers fail to detect this coordinated manipulation? The answer lies in cybernetics itself, specifically in W.R. Ashby's law of requisite variety. Ashby's law states that for a system to be stable, the controller must have at least as much variety as the system it regulates. Watch the variables in this equation. In a healthy ecosystem, the author, editor, publisher, and grant applicant are distinct entities. Here, the same person occupies every role. The variety of the controller collapses to one. Because insiders occupied every role, the system's external error correction capacity dropped to zero. Distributed quality controls are completely siloed. Google Scholar counts citations without checking journal ownership. The NSF reads metrics without auditing citation loops. The IRS tracks tax status but doesn't police commercial websites. The system failed because it was exclusively designed to catch single-node errors. It had no mechanism to detect multi-node manipulation by a single operator. Fixing this vulnerability requires replacing isolated checks with structural safeguards that span the network. Automated platforms must implement citation independence ratios. Any metric used on a grant application should publicly disclose the percentage of citations coming from venues directly controlled by the author. Open access publishers need automated conflict of interest detection to flag guest editors who publish heavily in their own special issues. Vulnerable scholarly societies must adopt minimum governance protections, strict term limits, supermajority requirements for organizational changes, and bylaws preventing officers from designing their own awards. Governance frameworks require plurality. When plurality collapses to a single voice, self-regulation is mathematically impossible. A system cannot survive if its observer controls the outcome.